Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the What Kind of Man at YouTube with another modelling video, going back on the bandwagon of the Honing Your Airbrush Skills video series. Now, we've had the break from the channel for a few months, and it's been a bit hard to get back in this series because I have not been practicing. I have got a couple of models under my belt during that time, as you've seen, and the airbrush has not received any substantial maintenance besides the swapping of the nozzle. I'm going to give it a bit of a clean up because it's feeling a bit stiff. There's a bit of crap inside it, so it's getting a full stripped down ultrasonic clean wipe, grease and whatnot. I'm going to pull out some lacquer paints. I'm going to draw some basic lines for the sake of practice, and then we're going to look into some shading a single piece. Now, I've been talking to modeller MOTD from Australia, the current Gunpla Builders World Cup champion, and gave me some cool tips on shading, which I'd like to incorporate in my modelling. So we're going to practice on a few pieces as well as do it on the kits to see how far we could take it and put some of those advices to the test. Here is all the pieces, nice and clean. Got to give them a bit of a dry down. And I had to give it 2 soaks in lacquer thinner. The first time the plastic container dissolved and mixed with the water in the ultrasonic cleaner. Second time, which I thought there'd be virtually nothing in there, this much crap and soot came out of it. And that's always going to hamper your airbrushing. Now, a bit of a maintenance note. You got a lot of threads, and the threads are an area that air and paint can escape through, especially past the paint chamber in your airbrush. So I like to use Vaseline. It's quite humorous for personal care, though at the same time it is a very thick jelly, and on the other end it will stop the backflow of paint. So what I'm going to do is, using a Q-tip or cotton bud, just get a little on there and ram it down the back of your airbrush and just get it all over that seal, because over time that rubber seal is going to dissolve and just get really loose, and paint's going to be able to flow backwards. For that little Vaseline on there and your needle and all your other threads, it should last a little longer. Also, all of your little threads, just apply a tiny bit just along the threads and the rear part of your needle, which I'll show you very shortly. Don't forget to add heaps onto this brass T piece. Maybe a bit different in your airbrush. When the tiniest amount of paint gets stuck in there, it has a tendency of remaining open or closed for airflow. So if you're trying to control air and you push down and it won't go back up and it's continuously pushing air, it's because this component is stuck. Now, with your needle, as always, careful with the tip. On the second half, not that half, on this half, just chuck a little grease on it. Wipe back excess really lightly and insert into the airbrush. Now, once it's all done, we're going to give it a bit of a rinse, a wipe, and we're going to flush out the whole brush with lacquer thinner or any of your heaviest thinner like Terps. This will make sure if there's any tiny remnants of grease in there, it will be flushed out and removed before we add paint. And with the very little contact it's going to make, if you've done correctly, will not affect the paint whatsoever. I've done this for a little while and find it that the airbrush feels as smooth and operates as nicely as something that's brand spanking new off the shelf. Now, I've sort of made the same mistakes I've made in past, a bit of water in the trap and hose making it a tad bumpy. I'm moving my hand far too quickly and increasing those gaps. Need to spray a bit slower, though in the way of having a well maintained needle nozzle, no paint, the spray
gradient is very, very clean, no spluttering, no bad lines, just only bad airbrushing. I also have to add to my defense in these videos, it is very hard to position the camera and film spraying straight lines with the camera directly ahead. I have to wrap my arms around the place. So much easier when I'm just relaxed and doing it right in front of me, but no excuses, but I do a lot better straight lines by myself.
So here is my little go. Now obviously achieving fine, not fuzzy lines at all, but I've definitely gotten very rusty. These lines are rubbish. Starts and ends of them are very fraily. It did splatter a bit because I had a bit of water in the line, so I drained as much as I can out and it became stable and splattery again. I need to do a full flush at some point, but not today, can't be bothered. A little experimenting with camouflage. You see in some of those World War II planes and whatnot. They look very cool, but I'm still rubbish at it. You can see, you know, some of where the paint's pooling and where it's overspraying, and tried doing a circle and a square and shading it, and they look like crap. But you know, it's all practice. I reckon if I'm able to draw, you know, very neat geometric shapes and shade them nicely, you can do that on the model. And another type of weathering which looks very cool. There's a couple of dark spots, but I'd like to try that on a kit one day, so you know, a little muck around on a piece of paper. And this is not the end of the video. I'm going to spray a piece, and I'll talk about dusting paint on, and I'm going to try shading it. So let's go to the second part of the video.
Now what I've got here is a spare piece, a skirt round piece of styrene from a Gelgoog model. I'm not building this kit, just a spare part, and we'll be practicing shading it. Now, right now I'm colouring it in with just some scrap grey paint, pretending to be primer. This is the general ideal way of applicating just a flat coat of paint, just about 15 centimetres, give or take. A centimetre away, and just ever so lightly dust on, allow some time to dry, and just do it over as many coats as you need until it's quite solid. Here you see I do a few. As you may notice, the first few passes you'll see that not exactly solidly even, very patchy. PSI has been set down as low as approximately 15. And the paint thinned 50-50, and just generally dusting it on slowly on top of each other. Now because the paint is landing ever so thinly onto the surface, not pulling the part too far away and the paint drying before it hits the model. If you paint far too far away and thinly, it's going to develop a sandpaper like texture. It's called orange peeling, and the paint builds up on the model in clumps instead of evenly on in the liquid manner. You want to have it nice and close, but not to the point where it's pulling. The reason why you want to use lots and lots of thinner. With this method to also be absolutely successful, be mindful of your environment on warmer, drier, humid days. Avoid spraying. The paint's going to spiderweb and just not work at all, or orange peel super badly. Mix the paint correctly, and if doubts about anything, lacquer retardant will slow down the drying time, but you'll still be able to apply in layers fairly rapidly without allowing the paint to dry. Just don't touch the piece. In this clip we're going to pre-shade. We're just outlining the edge. Lacquer black, thinned way beyond 50-50, and demonstrating spraying against the board. When held in one place for a very short period of time at a higher PSI, it's going to pull really badly. So just ever so slightly rocking the trigger back I'm lightly colouring in the edges. Doesn't have to be too neat, but as long as the edges are gradiently blackened and in proportion. Because of how thin the paint is, I have to do multiple passes on that one light. So if one pass is a bit of a disaster, it's not going to be too noticeable as it's translucent. But multiple passes on the same area is going to build up in the manner that you wish and is really ideal for shading. More control is required in the advanced steps. Now the base coating of the pre-shading process is colouring in between the black lines and just having a solid colour around that area. Same, the paint's fairly thin down. You need to be a bit more patient and very careful. Colour in the direct centre and slowly shade out until the red paint is blending with the black paint. Very, very, very light passes, so the paint slowly builds up and you're painting fairly consistently, but with the trigger not rocked back too far and moving the airbrush enough so the paint is not pooling. Pooling at this stage will ruin the effect, but this is a practice step altogether, and I recommend actually testing yourself on a few pieces like this before hitting up a model. Surprisingly, it's a lot easier than it looks, and I'm not putting much thought or stress into it at all. The final step to pre-shading is, once it's all coloured in, you've got your separate black and red area. Pull the airbrush back as if you're originally priming or just base coating, and ever so lightly dust on some paint until things start to blend at a consistency and the dark edging manner that you really, really like. It's important that if you're doing it over multiple pieces that you keep it consistent, so some areas are subtle and some areas are really, really thick, but again, not too hard at all, just a little practice and at least attempting it before you go at it hard. Now we are post shading. There's many different types of post shading to just using lighter, darker colours, filling in the area to make it look nice. According to MOTD, he mostly only shades with black and white, which seems a bit extreme to me, but having a go, ever so lightly, heavily thinning down the paint, shaded black where I think shadows would be casted below the rounded piece, and direct white on top, ever so lightly dusting on in a very small controlled area. It got an effect that I fairly liked. I'm going to try this again in the next video.
A modeller in Australia that goes by MOTD won the Australian heat of the Gunpla Builders World Cup a few times, is very renowned for his shading work and his previous miniatures. He has done some models where he's just only shading with black and white over a base colour. I've been inspired and gave it a go, and he personally gave me some tips. So what we just saw is me attempting that on just a single piece of a Gelgug. I am extremely pleased. Now if this happens to be too heavy, whether in my opinion for my model or for other people, and if you get something this heavy, you just dust on more red paint for a more subtle effect. So it's more important to go harder than softer, because you can always pull back instead of adding more. Adding more is a tad difficult with loading the paint in the airbrush and cleaning it and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going to try this a few more times. I did not think I'll get it on my first go. I think it's important to find out where shadows are caught and where light's reflecting off. The next few times I do this video for the series, I'll just get a scrap piece and just single piece out of the bits box and just paint it up and exactly see how we go. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, my 3D printer's just finished the component, and yeah, see you later.